Ever feel like you're putting on a bit of an act, like you're playing a role for the world?
Yeah.
Well, Shakespeare was all over that human experience back in the 16th century with Prince Hal in Henry IV, Part 1.
Right.
And that is exactly where we are diving in today.
Cool.
Not just the plot of this history play, but all that stuff that makes it still crackle after all these centuries.
Well, and what's so interesting about this play is that Shakespeare didn't just, chronicle the past.
Yeah.
He took these historical figures,
Yeah.
but he gave them these dilemmas that we still totally grapple with today,
Yeah.
Ambition, loyalty, that tug of war between what we should do and what we really want to do.
It's timeless.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into Hal's Shakespearean juggling act, set the stage for us. Who is this Henry IV?
All right, so picture England in the late 1300s, early 1400s. It's basically like a messy, messy family reunion.
Oh, great.
King Richard II is in charge,
Yay.
but let's just say he is not winning any popularity contests.
No.
Not with his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, who decides to just take the throne for himself.
Bold move.
Very bold. And that's how he becomes Henry IV. But you know what they say? Heavy is the head that wears the crown, especially if you kind of stole it.
Yeah, that's got to cause some tension in the family.
A little bit.
That's where the drama really kicks off, right? Taking the throne's one thing, but keeping it warm, the whole other story.
Exactly. And Henry III's reign, let me tell you, it was basically a giant game of whack-a-mole with rebellions. And leading the charge, the Percys.
Ah, the Percys, a family who always seems to have a school to settle. We're talking Hotspur, the son who practically breathes fire, and his father, Northumberland, who, let's face it, is the brains behind the operation.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, something about the rebels in these history plays, it makes you kind of root for them a little bit.
Right. And Shakespeare was smart enough to make them more than just these disgruntled nobles.
Right. Yeah.
Percys had helped put Henry I in power.
Ah, there we go.
They were expecting, a little gratitude, maybe a thank you card.
Right.
Instead, they kind of got the short end of the deal, which makes their rebellion less about good versus evil and more about that murky area where loyalty and ambition, they just kind of bump up against each other.
It's like that moment when you realize your friend who promised to share the pizza just ate the last slice.
The worst.
Betrayal. But speaking of unlikely friendships, while all of this royal rumble is going down, Shakespeare throws another wild card into the mix.
Yes.
Prince Hal and his partner in crime, the one and only Falstaff.
Oh, yes.
It's like Shakespeare saying, okay, we're looking at the kings, but here's this whole other side of society, the scoundrels, the tavern dwellers. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say what's so brilliant about that is he doesn't just show them to us separately. He weaves those levels of society together.
Okay.
So you've got the weight of the crown on one side,
Yep.
and then you've got Prince Hal hanging out in the tavern with Falstaff, as if being heir to the throne wasn't stressful enough already.
No.
It's like Shakespeare's holding up this funhouse mirror to power, showing us the grandeur of it, but also the absurdity of it all.
And Falstaff, he's like that friend, right, who could throw a party in a phone booth.
Totally.
And just have everybody laughing and having a great time. But there's also, this surprising depth to him, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He's the ultimate trickster.
Yeah.
Larger than life, you know, but also surprisingly human. He is. He's this lovable rogue, loves a good time, but he also makes us think about honor, courage, especially with, a war kind of brewing in the background.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, sure, okay, there are these rules, but are they really worth dying for?
Right, which is probably something I'm sure a lot of people were asking themselves at the time, especially with how he sees right through all that pomp and ceremony.
Yes.
Speaking of names, though, wasn't there a little, Shakespearean drama around what Falstaff was originally called?
Oh, yeah. Talk about a scandal. So Shakespeare takes this, revered martyr, John Oldcastle,
Okay.
and turns him into, Falstaff.
Wow. That's a bold move.
It just shows his genius, though, right?
Yeah.
Knowing when to tweak history to serve the story and maybe avoid some, shall we say, unwanted attention.
Probably a good call. Don't want to get on the wrong side of,
Powerful families.
powerful families. Exactly. But back to that master of image, Prince Hal. So he's got that party prince reputation, but then you hear him in that one soliloquy, and it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
This guy is playing 4D chess while everybody else is stuck on checkers.
totally. That soliloquy is Shakespeare at his absolute best.
It is.
Because it's like he's letting us in on a secret.
Yes.
Like we're co-conspirators with Hal.
Totally. You're right there in his head.
And he's saying, look, I know exactly how all of my actions look to you. He's using that.
Yeah, he's aware of how he's perceived.
He's not just rebelling. He's learning. He's observing. He's trying to understand the people that he will one day rule.
It's like he's saying, yeah, I'm having my fun now, so when I do step up, it'll be that much more impressive. It's Hal's journey. It's not just about, okay, I'm becoming king. It's Shakespeare exploring this idea that, true leadership, it requires more than just being born into it. You have to understand the people that you rule.
Yes.
And it's that time with Falstaff, however unconventional, that gives him that kind of street-level view of humanity. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And Shakespeare, he throws us right into that debate, right?
Yeah.
What makes a good leader? Is it someone who's born into it? Or is it someone who's actually walked a mile in, maybe some different shoes, even if those shoes walk straight out of a tavern?
Right, exactly. It's classic Shakespeare.
Right.
Making us kind of wrestle with these big questions. Power, responsibility, what it takes to lead. But let's be real, he doesn't just leave us wallowing in the heavy stuff, does he?
Absolutely not.
He gives us those hilarious moments, Falstaff, but then reminds us, hey, life is also full of drama, political intrigue, unexpected twists and turns. It's like, wow, a good play, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of twists, this play is set in the 1400s, but it still feels so relevant. It's about way more than just who's king, isn't it?
No, absolutely not.
It's like, well, yeah, we're watching a king fight for his crown, but underneath it all, it's about fathers and sons and that struggle between what you should do and what your heart's telling you. Come on. That's everyone, crown or no crown.
Right. And that's the magic of Shakespeare. He takes these massive historical figures, these huge events, and somehow distills them down into something that's so human, so relatable.
Totally.
Even all these centuries later.
Right? Yeah.
We see ourselves in these characters and their, dilemmas, their triumphs and their failures.
It's like that feeling you get when you suddenly realize, wow, people have been stressing about the same stuff for centuries.
Right.
But before we get too philosophical, gotta share a fun fact.
Okay.
That phrase, the game's afoot, you know that one?
Yeah.
Bet you didn't know it came from Henry IV, Part 1.
Oh, really? No way. That's amazing.
I know, right?
Just incredible how this line from a 16th century play about a king is now something we might say before, like a friendly soccer match.
Right.
It just goes to show how deeply ingrained Shakespeare's words still are in our culture, even when we don't even realize it.
Talk about a lasting impact, right?
Totally.
And this play, it's not just been printed in books, it's been on stages, it's inspired, countless interpretations, even films, like Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight. It just proves that a story from the 1400s can totally still pack a punch, even on the big screen.
Absolutely. It speaks to the power of Shakespeare's characters, his stories,
Yeah.
They're just so vivid, so full of life, that every generation finds something new in them, something to connect with.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Henry IV, Part 1, what's the one thing you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think just don't be afraid to dig a little deeper.
Okay.
Like life, this play is full of contradictions, right?
Yeah.
The characters, they mess up. Their motives, they aren't always perfect.
Right.
And there's not always like a neat little answer. But I think that's what makes it so captivating, so thought-provoking.
So well said. And on that note, huge thanks to you, the listener, for joining us on this Shakespearean adventure. We hope you discovered something new about Henry IV, Part 1, a play that reminds us that even kings, well, they put their pants on one leg at a time.
One leg at a time.
So they might have a little help with all those buttons and tights, right? Until next time, happy reading.